we all struggle with not accepting ourselves for one reason or another. When we create internal resistance and obstacles and this shouldn't be happening, or I shouldn't be like this, we're creating a lot more pain than we need to. We all want to be loved and accepted and respected. This concept of coming out is so powerful.
Welcome to Queer Talk. My name is Justin Gerhard. Our guest today is a professor of sociology affiliated with the Gender Studies program all the way out in UCLA in California. She just wrote a book called Come Out, Whoever You Are, which is all about the coming out story, which is very strongly affiliated with the queer community, but now it's also being used by other communities as well. We wanted to get Abigail on the network to talk about her new book and its affiliation with the queer community and with other communities as well. So please welcome Abigail Saguy.
Thank you so much.
So tell us about your book and why you wrote it.
So the book is called Come Out, Whoever You Are, and it's about how different types of people are talking about coming out and why they're using this language that is, as you said in your introduction, so closely identified with gay rights, the queer movement, queer community. And so it starts with the history of coming out within a queer community, telling the story of how it actually originates. It's taken from debutante and high society and their coming out parties, coming out into society, to talk not about coming out of the closet, but coming out into gay community in the 20s and 30s. And then over time, it shifts and it gets associated with the closet, coming out of the closet, and associated with more the oppression and that is especially strong in the 50s and then continues through the 60s, 70s, and coming out of the closet, announcing your identity to others, announcing a stigmatized identity. The next chapter in the book is about coming out as fat, which is actually the case that drew me into this topic. Then I started seeing other instances of this. So the book also looks at coming out as undocumented and unafraid. And then there's a chapter in there about coming out as polygamists among Mormon Fundamentalist Polygamists. And finally, the last chapter is about the Me Too movement as a kind of coming out and also as an instance of outing, and how, and this brings us full circle back to the gay rights movement and a lot of the controversies around outing. And so I think one of the contributions of this book as well is to show the similarities across very different kinds of identities, the similarity in the human experience, in that, you know, we all want to be loved and accepted and respected. We want dignity as human beings, and often we face obstacles to that for arbitrary reasons that have to do with whom we love, the color of our skin, our national origin, our gender. And so I think, you know, that gives a little sense of the perspective.
I just love that you have tied it all together. This is one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you about it. You know, we often see these groups as all separate, and part of even what we're experiencing with the Black Lives Movement resurging again is that we will not do this unless we all come together and realize that we are all experiencing a lot of the same emotions and feelings to varying degrees, obviously. Do a lot of them also identify as queer or gay or on the LGBTQ spectrum? Is that why the word coming out made sense for them to also use within fat or even undocumented? Was there a connection there?
Absolutely. It's an excellent question. And this was one of the things that I found, one of the central findings for some, not all of the groups. And so the fat acceptance activists who started talking about coming out as fat were also lesbian or queer women, queer people. They had known what it was like to come out as gay, come out as queer, come out as lesbian. And they felt like, wow, something similar is happening with this other identity, fat identity. They could see the similarities in terms of the kinds of oppression that they were experiencing, the pressures to change their sexual orientation, the pressure to lose weight. They drew these connections first. I think fat acceptance is very health affirming and life affirming. It's about accepting who you are, which again, you know, is so, I think, inspired by queer community and the gay rights movement, accepting and celebrating who you are, which before that was inspired from, you know, the Black is Beautiful and Black Power movement, which I think are, you know, all of our social movements in the United States are very much indebted to the Black Power movements and the earlier abolitionist movements, et cetera. So I think it's quite health affirming, and it's about, you know, not hating one's body and depriving one's body, but feeding it well and getting movement and learning to love yourself where you are right now.
I think you just nailed it. I think that's what people really need to step back and take a moment to consider, that your mental health is so important to your physical body. And that if you are completely at odds with your body and hate it because it's too fat, that is not, you know, it doesn't matter what program you go on. If that is the way you're thinking, it will continue and it will feel like an uphill battle your entire life. And so that is just amazing to hear, and how affirming it is when you do accept and then move on and move forward from there. And that's what we've all as queer people experienced too. In order to move forward, the first step is accepting that you're gay or you're queer
Absolutely.
or you're lesbian or you're non-binary or you're trans.
That's right.
And then you can move forward.
This is a human experience. You know, we all struggle with not accepting ourselves for one reason or another. Irving Goffman, Canadian sociologist, coined this term stigma, was the first one to use it in the sense that we use it today. And he talked that we're all stigmatized. You know, some of us hide it, it's better than others. It's not, but we all have some, and we all carry shame. I think this is part of the human condition. And I think, you know, this concept of coming out is so powerful in moving past internalized shame, who we are at this moment, and accepting it and embracing it. And then, as you say, moving from that place, accepting what is more generally, accepting
Absolutely.
our life circumstances. And, you know, that can be difficult and painful. And we don't want to be in quarantine. We don't want there to be a global epidemic, but that's what there is, right? And I think when we create internal resistance and obstacles and this shouldn't be happening, or I shouldn't be like this, we're creating a lot more pain than we need to.
I think it's amazing to consider that this word and term is actually going to bridge so many gaps between lots of different types of people. This is all a part of the evolution of this term. As you mentioned at the very beginning, it being this coming out into society. It certainly didn't have any stigma necessarily attached to it. But what I love is that, like I said before, it really is bridging so many gaps, because a lot of different people and places and communities and cultures are experiencing the same feeling behind this coming out process. I'm curious, what was the most surprising thing while writing this book for you?
The most surprising thing, well, I mean, one of the most surprising things was the very first interview when I heard self-identified fat women talk about coming out as fat. That, I think that was the big surprise that then, and I guess, you know, it was also very interesting and surprising to hear, for me to learn that Mormon fundamentalists were talking about coming out. None of them, you know, came out as queer or lesbian, right? They're all straight. But in this case, the link was being made more by public discourse. So when people like Anson, former Supreme Court Justice Scalia, say careful, you know, when talking about same-sex marriage, say careful, if we legalize same-sex marriage, it's going to be a slippery slope to polygamy. they're listening. You know, they call themselves the plural marriage advocates. They're listening and they're saying, yeah, it is the same. And, you know, in fact, we support gay rights, we support same-sex marriage, because if it's okay, if, you know, if it's no longer one man and one woman, then this opens a door to us. So this was a different way that the language, the imagery, the talk of coming out traveled from one movement to another.
I mean, that is an absolutely outstanding, and you know, something that not anybody would have seen coming, that the Mormon fundamentalists would see themselves being connected to the queer LGBTQ plus community. Do they see the connection?
Oh, they absolutely see it, and they speak to us in our interviews, which are in the book. Many of them will say openly in the interviews that they do not support homosexuality, they think it's a sin, etc. But they also see that the cause of same-sex marriage is in their interest, and so they support it in a strategic way. But you know, for some, not all, but for several of the people that Nicole interviewed, they also seem to develop more of a sense of what sociologists call linked fate, or this idea that their fate was somehow linked to that of the queer community. And I think for some, it was really an opportunity to develop empathy and see that, you know, we're maybe not so different. We're maybe facing some of the same obstacles.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see moving forward if that actually does provide a bridge that, you know, before this would never seemed to have been possible.
But, you know, when I first heard it, I was also surprised that the undocumented movement was using this language.
And yet, you know, as you said, a lot of them were taking that from their own experience of already being queer and realizing that these are very much the same. And
right.
Then again, it bridges the gap to the rest of the community to adopt it.
Absolutely. And this can be controversial. So in the fat acceptance movement, there was a split early on, and some people were using this language of coming out, and those were the people who were themselves LGBTQ or were in close contact and allies, etc. And there were others who were like, wait a minute, you know, I don't know about this language. And so that is interesting to see over time as well.
And I mean, and you have that even within, I'll speak from the queer community's perspective, that there's a lot of people that still want to dig their heels in and don't want things to change, or you can't use this term, this is our term. And I just don't think there's any way to move forward if we're so possessive about these things. You know, the labels of the queer community, the LGBT community have changed so much in the last 10 years as well. So, you know, I get sometimes where they're coming from, but at the same time, in order for us to keep moving forward, and again, like we said, bringing people together in unity, we won't be able to move forward any other way. So before we wrap up, I just want to know what you want people to take away from reading your book.
You know, this is a time when the country is just so divided, and even among progressives, there's so much division and mistrust. And sure, we have different experiences, and it's important to recognize those differences and not assume a white, male, straight, universal experience for everybody. Could add middle class to that, right? But I think we also want to balance that by keeping sight of our common humanity and the common aspirations that we have as humans to have dignity, respect, to love. And I think the seeing the way coming out is being used by so many different people really speaks to this. So all of us, this experience of coming out and affirming who we are is something that we all can share and understand and gain empathy of others through that.
There couldn't be a more important time for that message. We've always needed it, and I think there have been times in our history where we needed it more than other times. Right now is one of those times. And so thank you. I know you didn't necessarily know you were writing this book that would be read within the context of the world of 2020, Donald Trump, number 45, and the Black Lives Movement really making this surge. But it's happening. So all
Right.
meant to be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. Well, we want people to go buy your book. So where can they get it?
The book is available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible on Amazon.
Well, we will put all of that in the box below for everybody to go get. Thank
Thank
you so much
you.
for joining us on the Queer Network. And thank
My
you all for
pleasure.
watching at home. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the Queer Network. And until next time, keep it queer.